The scream of a chainsaw tore through the frozen Alaskan silence. A former Navy SEAL stood alone against men who treated protected forest like stolen cash, and in that moment, courage became a death sentence. A rifle butt crashed into his shoulder bone, grinding against bone, and the next second he was falling, spinning into an icy ravine, thrown away like something already forgotten. Below, there was no rescue waiting, only darkness, blood in the snow, and the low, steady shapes of wolves emerging from the shadows. A massive, silver-scarred alpha stepped forward, breath-steaming jaws closing in on the man's throat. The SEAL clenched his teeth and prepared to die until something ancient shifted in the leader's eyes and the forest itself seemed to hold its breath. If you believe in loyalty, second chances, and miracles that arrive when all hope is gone, subscribe to the channel now. This story may change the way you see faith, courage, and the bond between man and animal forever. Winter pressed down on the Alaskan forest like a held breath, snow hanging in the air beneath a low steel sky, the kind that made every sound travel too far and every mistake feel permanent. Jack Callahan moved through the trees with a measured, economical stride, boots breaking crusted snow without hurry, without waste. At 38, he was tall and broad-shouldered, built lean rather than bulky, the kind of strength carved by years of function rather than display. A short, neatly trimmed beard darkened his sharp jawline, already flecked with premature gray, and a thin scar cut through his right eyebrow, an old souvenir from a boarding operation in the Persian Gulf. His eyes were pale blue, steady to the point of unsettling the eyes of a man who had learned long ago that panic killed faster than bullets. Jack had once been a Navy SEAL. 12 years of saltwater gunmetal and decisions made in seconds had burned the boy out of him. He left the teams after a mission off the coast of Somalia went wrong. An extraction delayed, a teammate lost to an explosion Jack still replayed in his sleep. He never spoke about it, but it had sanded something down inside him, smoothing recklessness into restraint. Now he worked as a contracted wilderness officer near Palmer, Alaska, protecting stretches of state and federal land too remote for regular patrols. He trusted rules, but only when backed by presence. At his left heel moved Kaiser. The German Shepherd was nearly 5 years old, large even for the breed, with a thick black saddle over tawny flanks and a silvering muzzle that made him look older than he was. His ears stood erect, scarred slightly at the tips from training days, and his amber eyes missed nothing. Kaiser's gait was silent, fluid, his body angled subtly toward Jack, always aware, always checking. He had been a military working dog once, explosives detection until shrapnel tore into his hind leg in Syria. He limped for months after, and though he ran clean now, the memory lingered in his caution. Where Jack carried ghosts in silence, Kaiser carried them in vigilance. The first sound didn't belong. It was too mechanical, too crude. Jack stopped, fist tightening instinctively. Kaiser froze, head lifting, nostrils flaring. The noise came again, metal biting wood. A chainsaw. Jack's jaw set. Illegal logging this deep meant money, not desperation. He adjusted the strap of his rifle but didn't unsling it. Killing was a door he only opened when all others were sealed shut. Together, man and dog moved downslope, using the trees for cover until the forest opened into a raw wound of churned snow and splintered trunks. 3 men worked the saws. Another leaned against a matte black pickup, arms folded, watching the trees fall as if counting bills. Trent Weller stood apart from the labor like a man allergic to effort. He was in his early 40s, tall, with a narrow frame wrapped in an expensive winter parka that had never seen real weather. His hair was dark and carefully styled despite the cold, his face clean-shaven, almost smooth, with a salesman's smile that never reached his eyes. Those eyes were brown and restless, darting constantly, always calculating angles and exits. Trent had grown up in Anchorage money and learned early that consequences were things other people handled. Jack stepped into the open. "Shut it down," he called, voice level, carrying easily over the machines. "This is protected land." The chainsaws slowed, then died. Trent turned, a smile widening, as if greeting an old acquaintance. "Well," he said, hands spreading in mock welcome, "if it isn't Captain America and his dog." His voice was polished, amused. "You're a long way from a parade, Callahan." Jack felt the familiar tightening behind his ribs, the pressure of confrontation, the quiet arithmetic of risk. He didn't move closer. "You don't have permits for this zone," he said. "Pack up and leave." Trent laughed softly and glanced at Kaiser. "Dog's got the right idea," he said. Eyes open, mouth shut. His gaze returned to Jack, sharpening. "You should take a page from him." Kaiser let out a low, controlled growl, not loud but unmistakable. Jack rested a gloved hand on the dog's neck, feeling the warmth. The tension coiled beneath the fur. He knew this type of men who mistook patience for weakness, who believed land and law bent for the right price. What Jack didn't know yet was how far Trent was willing to go, or how quickly the forest would demand payment. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of sap and gasoline, and somewhere deeper in the trees something else stirred, unseen, listening. Jack took a step forward. Kaiser matched him exactly. And in that moment, with the snow falling thicker and the light already fading, the forest closed in around them, as if waiting to see who would break first. Jack did not raise his rifle when Trent Weller's smile sharpened. Instead, he studied the man the way he had once studied insurgent leaders, through dust and heat shimmer by the small tells that betrayed intention. Trent's hands were relaxed, two relaxed fingers loose near his pockets, as if he already knew how this encounter would end. That certainty bothered Jack more than the chainsaws. Kaiser sensed it too. The dog's weight shifted forward, muscles bunching beneath his thick coat ears, angling not toward the men with tools, but toward the tree line behind them, where sound traveled oddly, echoing twice before settling. "Last warning," Jack said, calm enough to sound bored. "Pack up. Leave now." Trent exhaled a laugh, short and dismissive. "You know what your problem is, Callahan?" He stepped away from the truck boots, pristine, never quite touching slush. "You still think rules are armor?" His eyes flicked to Kaiser. "Dog can't save you from gravity." Jack caught the shift too late. A sharp whistle cut the air, high, precise. From the trees behind Jack came movement, fast and coordinated. Two men emerged where there had been none, both dressed in winter camo dulled with mud. They were younger, late 20s, maybe, broad-backed faces, wind-burned and empty of hesitation. Hired muscle. One carried a steel pry bar, the other a compact rifle held low but ready. Jack pivoted, pulling Kaiser with him, but the ground betrayed him. Snow gave way to ice, hidden beneath a powder veil. His boot skidded half a step enough. The man with the pry bar rushed. Kaiser lunged, teeth flashing, catching fabric and flesh at the forearm. The man screamed, more shocked than hurt, and stumbled back. Jack used the opening to drive an elbow into the rifleman's throat, feeling cartilage give. Then pain exploded at his shoulder. Something heavy slammed into him from the side. Jack went down hard. Breath knocked loose, stars bursting across his vision. He rolled, instincts firing, but a boot pinned his injured arm. The pry bar rose, fell. Bone did not break, but something inside screamed wrong. Kaiser's bark tore the air apart, raw and furious. "Enough," Trent said, voice cool, almost irritated. "We're not here to make noise." He stepped closer, crouching so Jack could see his face clearly. Up close, Trent smelled of expensive cologne fighting unsuccessfully against gasoline. His skin was pale, unlined, the face of a man who had never missed a meal or paid for a mistake. "You always think you're the last line," he murmured. "But edges exist for a reason." They dragged Jack across the snow, Kaiser snapping and lunging until a rifle butt struck the dog's ribs with a dull thud. Kaiser yelped once but stayed upright, planting himself between Jack and the men until another blow sent him skidding into a drift. Jack roared, then something old and feral tearing loose in his chest, but Trent's men were already moving, practice deficient. The forest thinned abruptly. Wind howled louder here, funneled through stone. Jack knew this place. Locals called it Raven's Drop, a narrow ravine masked by snow-laden brush plunging straight down into rock and shadow. Accidents happened here every winter. Bodies were rarely found intact. Trent shoved Jack forward. Jack staggered, boots scrabbling, heart hammering, not with fear, but calculation. He could still fight if he timed it right. He twisted, grabbing for Trent's sleeve, but a sudden shove from behind stole the ground entirely. For a split second, weightlessness. Then the world tilted, and Jack fell. He did not scream. Training held even as his body betrayed him. He hit hard, rolled, struck again. Stone ice branches, each impact rang through him like a bell. Pain flared white-hot along his shoulder and ribs, then dulled into something deeper, heavier. At last he slammed against a rock shelf and stopped, lungs burning, mouth filling with blood. Darkness crowded the edges of his vision. Above, far away, Kaiser's bark echoed once, twice, then cut off abruptly. That was what hurt most. Jack drifted in and out of consciousness. Cold gnawed at him, a patient predator. When his eyes finally opened, the dark was not empty. Shapes moved within it. A low sound vibrated through the ravine, not wind, not machinery, breath. Eyes appeared, first one pair, then many, yellow, steady, unblinking. Wolves stepped into the thin spill of moonlight, their coats thick with winter bodies, lean and precise. They circled without haste, an ancient geometry. Jack forced himself upright against the rock, drawing his knife with numb fingers. He knew wolves. He had studied them, respected them. But respect did not change hunger. One wolf moved differently, larger than the rest, silver threading its dark fur, scarred along the muzzle as if marked by an old war. The alpha. It approached until Jack could see frost clinging to its whiskers. Its gaze was not cruel, only assessing, as if Jack were whether dangerous, but not personal. Jack's strength bled away with his warmth. He lowered the knife slightly, chest heaving. "Do it then," he whispered, voice cracking in the cold. "Just don't waste it." The wolf paused. It leaned in, inhaled. Blood, sweat, metal, and something else. The animal stilled, head tilting almost imperceptibly, as if reaching backward through memory. The circle did not close. Above them, unseen, the forest listened. Jack did not die where the ravine ended, though the cold tried to make that decision for him. He lay half-curled against the stone shelf. Breath, shallow pain, thick and distant, as if his body belonged to someone else. The wolves held their circle, neither closing nor leaving. Snow sifted down in a soft, relentless hush, turning the ravine into a white throat that swallowed sound. The alpha stood closest, massive, broad-chested fur, dark with a silver wash along the spine, the old scar across its muzzle, pale as bone. Its eyes were not the burning hunger Jack had expected, but a steady, appraising gold, the gaze of a creature that weighed histories as much as meals. Jack swallowed and shifted, testing his shoulder. Lightning flared, then settled into a deep ache. He lowered the knife to the snow, a deliberate peace offering. "I'm not running," he murmured, voice hoarse, fogging the air. "And I won't hurt you." The words felt foolish human. The alpha stepped closer, breath steaming, and lowered its head to sniff Jack's chest and collar. Blood cordite residue from earlier sweat, the faint metal tang of the knife, and beneath it all the older smell that clung to Jack's jacket and skin, antiseptic wool and dog. The wolf paused. Somewhere in the pack, a low chuff answered not a growl but a sound of acknowledgement. The alpha lifted its head and gave a short, commanding rumble. The ring loosened. Wolves settled into the snow bodies, folding with economical grace, tails, tucked ears rotating to the wind. Jack exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. He did not mistake mercy for friendship, but the pause felt earned. The alpha turned and lay down sideways to Jack, close enough that warmth radiated through the cold, a living wall against the wind's knives. When the wolf's tongue rasped once across the blood at Jack's collarbone, rough brief, Jack winced, then felt a strange easing as the heat spread. He understood the gesture without understanding how a mark, a claim, a warning to others. Above the ravine carried sound oddly, and Jack caught fragments, boots on snow. A voice he recognized as Trent's, distant and irritated, then fading. They thought the drop had finished him. That arrogance would buy him time, but not safety. Jack closed his eyes for a count of 10, breathing shallow and controlled, and reached inward for the discipline that had carried him through surf and fire. Survive first. Decide later. Elsewhere beyond the trees and the ravine's mouth, a helicopter did not come. Instead, a woman fought the wind on foot. Emily Hart moved with a medic's economy and a pilot's stubbornness, tall and lean. Her posture straight despite the pack and winter layers that broadened her shoulders. She wore her auburn hair in a tight braid down the back of her hood, a practical choice that left her pale face exposed to the cold. Freckles stood out sharply against wind-reddened skin. At 34, Emily had the eyes of someone who had learned to read damage quickly, gray attentive, softened by empathy, but hardened by memory. She had flown medevac in Afghanistan before a hard landing shattered her ankle and grounded her permanently. The limp never quite left, nor did the need to be useful when people went missing. Emily had known Jack years ago through her brother, another SEAL who hadn't come home. She recognized Jack's name when the Ranger check-in failed and followed the last ping with a GPS unit clipped to her chest. She paused now at the tree line overlooking Raven's Drop, crouching low, scanning. Below the ravine breathed mist. No body. No blood trail leading out. Only wolf tracks, many, and the churned snow of a struggle. Emily's jaw tightened. "You stubborn bastard," she whispered, equal parts prayer and accusation. She slipped her gloves back on, checked the camera hanging from her neck, a compact device scuffed by use, and began recording, documenting what she saw, what might vanish with the next storm. In the ravine, the Alpha lifted its head ears, pricking attention, shifting uphill. The pack mirrored the movement. Jack followed their gaze, understanding that he was not the only one listening anymore. The forest remembered debts, and tonight it was deciding how to collect or repay them. Jack rested his palm against the wolf's thick ruff, feeling the steady thrum of life beneath fur. "All right," he breathed, a grim smile tugging at his mouth. "Let's see what you've decided." The snow kept falling, sealing the moment in white, while above and below paths converged toward a reckoning that had already begun. Dawn did not arrive cleanly. It seeped into the forest like a bruise, turning the snow a dull blue and stretching shadows into long accusations. Jack woke to stiffness and pain layered like sediment, the wolf's warmth at his side already fading as the pack repositioned with the light. The Alpha rose first, tall and unhurried scar pale against dark fur, and looked upslope with a focus that made Jack's pulse quicken. Trouble had a direction. He pushed himself upright inch by inch, breath controlled, and listened. Far above, metal thudded against rock, too deliberate to be weather. On the rim of Raven's Drop, Trent Weller had returned, and he had brought someone new. Miles Carter stepped out of the truck with a methodical grace that contrasted sharply with Trent's impatience. Miles was in his late 30s, stocky rather than tall, neck thick as a stump beard, trimmed to regulation neatness, as if old habits refused to die. His eyes were a washed-out green flat, and assessing the eyes of a man who solved problems by removing them. A former combat engineer discharged after an incident no report could quite pin down. Miles carried his past like a toolkit, quiet, heavy, and always within reach. He shrugged on a pack that sat too snug against his back and began laying out coils of det cord with the reverence of a priest arranging relics. "We don't need a spectacle," Trent snapped, pacing near the edge, boots scuffing snow. He kept his gloves on now, jaw tight, the night's uncertainty gnawing at his certainty. "Just make it disappear." Miles nodded once, not looking up. "Rock's fractured," he said, voice low and even. "She'll come down clean. Anyone below won't feel a thing." He spoke without cruelty, but without mercy either, as if discussing a repair. Across the ravine, half hidden by a wind-polished boulder, Emily Hart flattened herself into the snow. Her breath fogged the viewfinder for a second before she wiped it clear and steadied the shot. From here she could see Miles's hands, scarred precise, and the unmistakable geometry of explosives. Her jaw set. Evidence mattered, but so did timing. She recorded anyway, fingers numb, mind calculating escape routes that weren't there. Below, the Alpha's ears flicked. The pack shifted again, a ripple of muscle and fur. Jack followed the movement with a soldier's eye and realized what the wolves had chosen, not to flee, but to manage the space. He crawled toward a narrow seam he'd glimpsed earlier, a side chimney worn smooth by centuries of meltwater. Every movement cost him. His shoulder protested with hot insistence. The Alpha stepped in front of him, once blocking the path, then angled aside, allowing passage. Permission, not protection. Jack swallowed a grim smile. "Copy that," he whispered, using an old word that felt right. Above, Miles finished placing the charges and rose dusting snow from his knees. Trent leaned over the edge, peering down with binoculars. "Nothing," he muttered. "Just wolves." His lip curled. "Do it." Emily's boot slipped. A pebble ticked, then clattered. The sound ricocheted like a gunshot in the morning stillness. Trent's head snapped up, eyes sharp now. He raised a hand, pointing. "There," he said softly. "Get her." Miles did not run. He slung his rifle with unhurried competence and took a knee breath, slowing. Emily felt the weight of the sight settle on her chest like a hand. She flattened, heart hammering, and thought, not for the first time, of how quickly help failed when terrain decided otherwise. The first shot cracked and missed chewing stone inches from her shoulder. She rolled snow, filling her collar, and slid toward a dip that promised cover but delivered none. Below, Jack heard the report echo down the ravine, felt it in his teeth. The Alpha surged forward, not toward the men, but along the ridge's contour, a gray blade slipping through brush. The pack followed in staggered silence, moving with the confidence of creatures who knew the land's shortcuts. Jack forced himself up, bracing against the rock, and limped toward the chimney. He climbed by memory and grit skin, scraping breath, counting, emerging into brittle light just as Miles chambered another round. Jack did not aim at a man. He fired into the air, a sharp punctuation that broke rhythm and expectation alike. The shot bought a heartbeat. In that heartbeat, the Alpha burst from cover, not at Miles's throat, but at the pack slung beside him, teeth clamping and dragging the explosives clear with astonishing intent. Chaos erupted. Trent shouted. Miles cursed, once the sound small and surprised. Emily scrambled, breath ragged, as the wolves vanished downslope with their prize. Jack steadied himself against a tree. Kaiser's bark finally cutting through the din as the dog limped into view. Ribs sore but spirit intact. Eyes locked on Jack like a promise kept. The mountain held its breath again. The charges were gone. The lie was exposed. And for the first time that morning, Trent Weller looked unsure of which edge would forgive him, if any. Morning finally chose mercy. The storm loosened its grip, and the mountain exhaled a pale gold light that softened the angles of rock and snow, turning danger into distance. Jack stood braced against a spruce shoulder, bound tight with a field dressing Emily had cinched expertly, the ache now a manageable throb instead of a scream. Kaiser pressed his flank against Jack's leg, a solid, familiar weight. The German shepherd's ribs showed faint bruising beneath the thick coat. His breathing, even eyes bright with the relieved vigilance of a guardian who had not failed. The wolves did not linger. The Alpha paused at the tree line, silver-threaded fur catching the light, and held Jack's gaze a final moment, neither tame nor cruel, before leading the pack back into the forest, as if closing a door that did not need locking. Emily Hart lowered her camera hands, shaking now that the crisis had passed. Up close, the lines at the corners of her eyes were more visible, etched by sun and long nights. She smiled anyway, a tired, genuine curve that reached her gray eyes. "You look terrible," she said softly. The medic's assessment wrapped in a friend's relief. Her auburn braid had come loose, wisps of hair catching on her hood freckles, bright against wind-burned skin. She moved with a slight hitch in her step, her old ankle reminding her of gravity, but her posture stayed straight, composed. "Which means you're alive." Above them, rotors beat the air. This time it was not Trent's private machine. A state rescue helicopter settled onto a clear patch with practiced gray snow spiraling away. Two figures jumped down. The first was Deputy Mark Ellison, mid-40s, rangy, with a weathered face and a mustache that had seen too many winters. He had the careful kindness of a man who'd learned to speak softly to frighten people. The second ranger, Lila Moreno, younger, compact, dark hair pulled tight beneath her helmet, eyes sharp with competence. She moved like someone who trusted her training and expected the world to comply. They took in the scene quickly: Jack's injuries, Emily's footage, the disturbed snow where explosives had been, and nodded to each other without words. Trent Weller did not resist when they found him pacing near the truck, certainty finally gone from his posture. His expensive jacket hung open. Breath ragged, the salesman's smile nowhere to be found. Miles Carter sat on the tailgate, hands visible, face unreadable. The meticulous calm that had once steadied his work now steadied his surrender. The charges were recovered downslope where the wolves had dropped them, intact and incriminating. Emily handed over the camera. "Everything's here," she said, voice steady again, from placement to intent. As paperwork replaced adrenaline, the forest returned to itself. Snow fell lightly, a benediction rather than a threat. Jack watched Kaiser nose the airtail, making a small, satisfied sweep. He crouched carefully and rested his forehead against the dog's. "We're good," he murmured, the words meant for both of them. Kaiser answered with a huff that might have been a laugh. Hours later at the clinic in Palmer, the light was warm and smelled faintly of antiseptic and coffee. Jack's shoulder would heal, ribs too. He signed forms with a hand that shook less each minute. Emily waited nearby, jacket draped over a chair, camera set down like a burden she could finally release. "You don't have to go back out there alone," she said, not pressing, just offering. "The state will make noise. There'll be hearings." Jack nodded. He felt different, not braver, not younger, but quieter, as if some internal alarm had finally been switched off. "I'll testify," he said. "And then I'll keep walking the lines. With backup this time." He glanced at Kaiser, who thumped his tail against the linoleum, scandalizing a nurse into a smile. A week later, the forest wore new snow like a clean page. Warning signs went up. Patrol schedules doubled. The illegal cut was documented, the damage named. At the edge of the trees, Jack paused with Kaiser at heel and listened. No chainsaws, only wind and the soft tick of snow settling. He thought of the Alpha's steady eyes and the way the mountain had chosen restraint over collapse, and he understood something simple and sustaining hope didn't arrive as rescue. It arrived as continuity, the chance to keep doing the right thing tomorrow. Jack turned back toward town, toward warmth and work, and a future that did not require forgetting. Kaiser followed confident whole. Behind them the forest held its silence, not empty now, but at peace. At the end of this story there is a quiet truth many of us recognize in our own lives. Miracles do not always arrive as thunder or light from the sky. Sometimes they arrive as protection. We did not earn help we did not expect, or strength we did not know we still had. Whether you call it grace, providence, or the hand of God, there are moments when something greater than us steps in and says, "Not yet." In everyday life we walk through our own storms. Illness, loneliness, loss, fear for tomorrow. Like Jack, we often think we must survive by our own strength alone. But this story reminds us that God's care can come through unexpected forms: a loyal companion, a stranger who refuses to look away, or a second chance when the world seems ready to bury us. Faith is not always about being saved from hardship, but about being carried through it. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to share it with someone who may need hope today. Leave a comment and tell us where you are watching from or what this story reminded you of in your own life. And subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next story of compassion, courage, and quiet miracles. May God bless you, protect you, and walk beside you through every season of your life. May He bring peace to your heart, strength to your days, and light to your path.